Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome to our event today. And I will talk a little bit about our event in a few minutes. So I hope you're all doing great and keeping safe. So I would like to start by thanking you all for being here today. It is definitely sunny where I am. So my name is Moon. I have been with Spreeha as a volunteer since early 2019. By profession, I am an HR professional. I am currently also working for another nonprofit called Village Reach. We are working directly with COVAX, with vaccine distribution in some parts of US and also remote parts of South Africa. I actually feel blessed to be working through this pandemic and being able to keep myself sane and safe, like physically and mentally during this difficult time. I hope you all are too. As we all know, COVID-19 can lead to neurological and mental complications, such as delirium, agitation, and even stroke. But what we are not very aware of is that it can still affect you, even if you don't have COVID-19. So it can be triggered, like it can trigger like mental health conditions and aggravate existing ones in some people. And it is happening to a lot of people around us, even though sometimes we don't notice, or maybe we don't understand. So keeping this in mind, today's topic is mental health. How do we manage our mental health during this difficult time? So we have invited two speakers today to talk about this issue in great detail. We will also have our platform open for questions throughout the entire event. Please feel free to ask any questions. And also, I would like to let you all know that this event is being recorded. So, not to wait any longer, I would like to introduce our speakers today. So firstly, we have Anjan Sattar. He is a MD and also a Master's of Public Health. He's currently working as a psychiatrist at the Providence St. Peter's Hospital. He's also serving as an adjunct faculty at the University of Washington and Pacific Northwest Health Sciences University. And our second speaker is Sharmin Banu. We all know her as Nipapu. She is an executive coach. She helps leaders and senior professionals in the tech industry maximize their potential. In 2009, she was working as a software engineering manager at Microsoft. But then she discovered her passion for helping people grow. And that is what led to her courageous leap into coaching. With her decade-long experience in coaching, she found that self-care and emotional well-being makes the difference between an average and an excellent leader. With this, I would like to give the floor to our first speaker, Anjan Sattar.
Hello, thank you, Moon. My name is Anjan, as all of you guys know me, and I think I know all of you too. I'm going to talk about mental health, and I'll try my best to keep it simple. When I'm afraid I might confuse you further on mental health. I also want to make it kind of informal so that I don't bore you. So please feel free to interrupt me if you want me to clarify on something. So let's start with what is mental health first, okay? Mental health is basically a subspecialty of medicine. You probably know the other subspecialties like, let's say, cardiology. What do they deal with? They'll deal with the heart. Hematologists will deal with your blood. in mental health, we deal with your mind, basically. And it's as strange as it might sound, how can you really fix a mind? We'll talk about that a little bit. So first start with what is mind, right? And for the Seattle crowd especially, I think it'd be best to compare it to the computer. So if you take computer, it has a bunch of hardwares, and I'm not a computer specialist, so I'm not going to go into detail of what kind of hardwares. But as a result of the functions of hardwares, and you have to use this software. And what we do in mental health is we are the software part of it. So mind will be the software of a computer. And as you can understand, if there is any malfunction of any of these hardwares, then you have a software problem. And sometimes the hardwares might be fine, you still may have a software problem. And our mental health is like that. Is a lot of times we can see that there's an organic cause. Maybe something is not right with some of the glands, and you're having severe anxiety. You can have a severe depression from that. But sometimes there is nothing wrong with your organs. It's just your software is not working. And then we try to intervene at that point. And the question is, what is, let's say, how do you know what is good mental health, right? How do you know when to seek for help? The bottom line, I think the generally accepted way of understanding, let's say, good mental health is basically your ability to learn, your ability to be flexible, your ability to enjoy life and keep some interpersonal relationships that are meaningful to you. That is basically acceptable way of saying this is good mental health. In my opinion, however, is that there is also a certain degree of comfortability. How comfortable you are with your mental health. I've treated a lot of people with different type of problems. And sometimes I've seen people, they're very comfortable with themselves, even though I know they cannot really function in the society. So who am I? Am I in a better position than anybody else to say that they have a mental illness? I mean, I don't know. I think I'll let you guys decide that. So if when do you feel that you need the help? You need the help when we say that you're not comfortable with yourself anymore. And the other thing, of course, is that your quality of life, if that is affected by your mental health. And how can a quality of life be affected? Let's say you are a student and you have you're having problems with, let's say, attention, and it's affecting your grades, you're affecting your exams. So we say, okay, go and get some help. If you're a homemaker and because you're so depressed, you cannot really do your day-to-day work. You cannot function, just even the basics. And then we say, okay, you should get some help. So the bottom line is how comfortable you are, and then if your mental health problems are affecting your quality of life, then we say that you need help. And oftentimes, don't forget one thing is that it's not you who can understand that you're having problems. A lot of times it's your loved ones, it's your family who's saying, hey, you're not functioning correctly. And a lot of times we don't understand. We think that I'm the only one who has this anxiety. I'm the only one who feel uncomfortable around people or any group of people. And I'm the only person who's dealing with it. So it takes a little time for you to even understand that you need mental health treatment. So often, again, it's not you, and it's your loved ones who will help you to get into mental health treatment. So let's say once you've decided that, or let's say once your family has decided, no, you need some mental health treatment, what do you do? Who do you go and see, right? There are a lot of things you can do, right? You can go and see a therapist, you can go and see a psychologist, you can see a psychiatrist, do I take any medicine? How do you decide that? So first, let's talk about what is the difference between, let's say, psychology versus psychiatry. a psychology, and Nipa will probably go into more in depth about that. Psychology will be basically is the science of your mind. Uh, Basically, it talks about your coping skills. It talks about your defenses. I mean, what is a defense? Defense is a basically a psychological process by how you deal or communicate with the rest of the society. So a psychologist will help you with those. And what does a psychiatrist does? Our role is more biological. So we take everything into account from what we know from psychology. And then we incorporate it from a biological perspective, from our body perspective. And then we try to intervene or help people who need help. Uh, so bottom line is that a therapist will help you to look at things differently, to understand yourself probably better. And a psychiatrist's job comes down to also understand your psychopathologies better, but our job becomes at the end to prescribe medications. And that's what we do in psychiatry. So the question is how do we decide what kind of psychopathologies do you have and how do we treat you, right? So I shall just keep it simple and give you an example of what I do and how I do, and you can you can generalize it to other people as well. So when a person comes to see us, we do not read mind. Okay, we ask questions. We read your behavior. We look at you. We basically see how you're dressed, how you're talking. If you're talking too much, then we try to direct you in a way so that we can gather the information. If you're not talking at all, then we have a different subset of questions that we follow. So we basically read your behavior, your appearance, and then we ask questions, try to tailor them towards coming to a diagnosis. Now, one thing in psychiatry you have to also understand about this diagnosis is that in psychiatry, the diagnosis is not necessarily the final diagnosis. First of all, how do we come to make those diagnoses, right? What we have done is basically we have taken symptoms. Let's say somebody is anxious, somebody is having panic attacks, somebody is depressed, somebody is having nightmares. So we take those symptoms and put them in a basket, and then we put a label on them. And problem is a lot of times these same symptoms are going to different baskets. And it's difficult to really always put them in the right basket after, let's say, if I spend an hour with a person and then I have to put all those symptoms in a basket, it's not always going to be very specific, very reliable. And that's why there will be a lot of inter-rater variability when it comes down to diagnosis. So how do I approach that? I usually tell people is don't get too focused on diagnosis, because in psychiatry, there are one diagnosis that is very important, and there are a couple more diagnoses that is very important. And that diagnosis is bipolar disorder type 1, we call them. And we can talk more about those diagnoses later. But otherwise, not necessarily you have to focus on a diagnosis. What is the problem of a diagnosis? What I have seen is people tend to basically define themselves with their diagnosis. They tend to control their, basically they feel that they cannot function because we gave them some kind of diagnosis. And it's not a problem for the person only, it's also a problem of their family, because let's say if I call a person that the person is bipolar, or I say a person is psychotic, and oftentimes that will hurt their confidence level. They think that, okay, I'm bipolar, I cannot do anything in my life. Also their family or friends or somebody loved ones, they can take advantage of that. Okay, you're having mood swings, hey, this is your bipolar. talking. It's not it's not my fault. It's your fault because it is because you're bipolar. That's why you are having this problem. Basically, gaslighting a person. So that's why I don't get too focused on a diagnosis, even though there's other subset of diagnosis that will be important to take into account. So let's say now what do I do? So basically, we are treating mostly with symptoms. We are addressing. Let's say if somebody comes with depression, we try to prescribe them medication for depression. Why a diagnosis of bipolar disorder is important is because there are certain medications you cannot prescribe for the patients with bipolar disorder. The rest of the treatment, however, is kind of similar. The medications are not going to harm you most of the time. Versus a bipolar patient can get into mania when we are prescribing certain medications. So how do I decide, right? How do I decide what kind of treatment do you need? Do you need therapy or do you need medications? Do you need both? And what type of medications do you really need? So if you look into research, it will show if it is anxiety and depression, if that kind of psychopathology, both psychotherapy and medications, they can work equally effective. But if you combine them together, if you combine medicine with therapy, then they tend to work much better. And there is actually evidence that psychotherapy also works as good as medicine, because you can do an MRI of a brain of a person who has depression, and if you prescribe them antidepressant, you can see the changes. Let's say a brain change will be in depression will be, there's a part called hippocampus in your brain, which is basically the hard disk of your brain. And if you're depressed, then that part of your brain can shrink a little bit. And what is the problem with that? As you can understand, if it shrinks, then your memory is not as sharp anymore. So let's say a depressed person comes and we prescribe them antidepressant, and that hippocampus can regain its previous volume. At the same time, even psychotherapy can be as good to change those, let's say, to help the hippocampus regain its volume as well. So they're equally effective. But when you combine them together, they will be more helpful. So that's why if I see somebody, then I'll say, okay, I can prescribe you medications, but you also should probably think about going for psychotherapy. Now, then comes to us is how do we decide what type of medications you need? That will depend on how you're presenting. Generally speaking, if you think about women and men, they tend to react differently to medicines. There are certain type of medicines that women tend to react better, and there are certain type of medicine that men tend to react better. So that we take into account. And then we also look at what kind of problems are you having. If it's just depression and anxiety, then okay, we are talking about giving you anxiolytics. We're thinking of giving you antidepressants. If you're having, let's say, your mood is not very stable, you're having ups and downs of your mood, then we think about giving you mood stabilizers. If you're having problem with, let's say, what is psychosis? You can ask. Psychosis is basically break from reality. You cannot distinguish real versus unreal. And then we choose antipsychotics for those patients with psychosis. And then actually you can use these medicines that we use for, let's say, psychosis. You can also use them for anxiety. You can also use them for depression. So it's kind of a very complex decision you have to make after seeing somebody with these mental health problems. What else should I cover? Is there anything you want to ask? Any questions about this?
We are almost at time, but yeah. Oh no worries. I don't see any questions, but I do have a question. Sure. Like if you are, yeah. So I would like to touch on something like that's very sensitive, I think, in our culture. I don't know if it's in other cultures too, but in my, our culture, I would say mental health is a very sensitive topic. Like most people tend to kind of like graze through it and not really like talk about it. So I know a lot of people who are going through like mental health issues, but they're never ready to talk about it. They don't want to get medical help. And I like, and a lot of women are as well, like, suffering through this when they don't have any diagnosis. And some of them don't even are not working. So they don't have that health coverage or like, that coverage that you have of a private healthcare professional that you get help from like your work or something. So what would you say like they should do? Like if this is such a sensitive topic, is there like, I don't know, like a helpline that is available for everybody that you could go to like in a private manner, or like maybe even like, I don't know, just to talk to somebody? Like, what would you say about like that? And how would you address this like issue of like people not being able to talk?
The thing is that it's not only in Bangladeshi culture. I think it's almost every culture. It is more pronounced in Asian cultures.
Yes.
Even let's say like Koreans, Japanese people. I mean, it is a big stigma for them. But I think in that way, actually, Bangladeshis are not as bad as, let's say, Koreans and Japanese are. They're very that mental health is very stigmatized in those two societies, especially. So how do you address it? Really, there's no easy answer to that. Basically, education of general public to accept that mental health is a subspecialty, that it can be basically you have to educate people about mental health as it is a science and as it can be a helpful tool instead of a stigma. And I think that is probably the answer, is educating people more.
Thank you. I think we do have two other questions, but who's that from? I do see that there are two other questions, but what are the questions? Would somebody like to ask directly?
So this one is from me. So Anjun, my question was that if you don't tell a patient or the patient's family that they have bipolar manic depression, that how would you give them the medicine?
No, absolutely. I mean, you have to tell them. First of
Right.
all, you do not. Now, don't forget one thing is you do not talk to patient's family without patient's permission.
Right.
And so you have to tell them what is their diagnosis. You give them a diagnosis, but at the same time, but for bipolar 1 and manic depression, as you're calling it, that is a very sensitive diagnosis, and that diagnosis has to be really taken into account. That is the main diagnosis you have to be careful about, because you cannot prescribe certain medications with that diagnosis. Everything else, it probably would not matter much. So if person is bipolar, then you really tell them, okay, this is your diagnosis.
So you have to be very careful before you diagnose.
Yeah, you give them a diagnosis. You don't hide those diagnoses.
Right.
Everybody has diagnoses. You have to tell them what you're diagnosing them with. At the same time, you educate them. Because don't define your life by your diagnosis. It is not you. It is just a condition that is very treatable, and that's what you do.
The hippocampus shrinking, is that a symptom or is that the disease?
No, that's the result of your depression. I mean, first of all, you cannot really. Let's say if you're older, that's your hippocampus probably has shrunk a little bit anyway, and as a result of that, you can have memory problem. But a lot of times, let's say younger generation, your hippocampus shrinks as a result of because you're depressed. It doesn't get too pronounced in younger people because your volume is already reasonable. But as we grow older, that size already becomes smaller, and then you're depressed on top of that, it becomes even more smaller. So you see a lot of this, what we call is pseudo dementia type patients that has memory problem, although they don't have dementia. The memory problem is because their hippocampus has shrunk a little bit because of their depression.
Thank you for your question and thank you for your answer. So I think Zaki Bhai has one more question after this, and then we can move on to Nipapu for our second speaker. Okay.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit more basic. So we're very aware of the different kinds of physical problems, physical illness that we have. However, I feel like we always kind of tend to bucketize all mental issues into one. That person has some mental issue. I think it's recent times we have learned more about, depression versus bipolar disorder. So if you could briefly just give the top few, tell us about the top few mental illness, that would be really helpful.
Okay, you can categorize them in a lot of things. In the past, you really didn't think of mental illness as a problem unless if the person was psychotic. When they're acting out, if somebody's manic, they can claim that they're the Messiah, or they claim they can, they have special powers. That it used to be. That's the case. That unless you're psychotic, nobody thought you were crazy, or nobody thought that you have a mental health problem. But as our society has evolved, nowadays we talk about a lot of other things. We talk about attention problem for kids and for adults. Anxiety disorder is a spectrum of disorders. What entails anxiety disorders? It can be just generalized anxiety. It can be panic disorder. It can be a social anxiety disorder. And then comes, of course, the mood disorders. What are the mood disorders? Depression is one of them. And the other one is like a bipolar disorder. And that's the big one. The bipolar disorder has received a stigma by itself because it has been, let's say, overdiagnosed by not only by professionals but also by family. If you're having, let's say, a mood swing because something happened, and a lot of times people's let's say coping skills are not as great, and they're reacting too quickly, and immediately a family member, and I have seen this in my practice a lot, a family member goes on to diagnose them, okay, you're bipolar. So that by itself is a kind of a sensitive diagnosis. So what did you talk about? Attention problem, anxiety disorders, then mood disorders, and then of course then we're talking about psychotic disorders. Like you cannot really distinguish what is real versus unreal. You're hearing things, but nobody's there. That'll be the simplest way of saying what is a psychotic disorder. Then there are personality disorders, and that is another big one that you need to take into account. Then there are a bunch of other, like somatoform disorders. What are they? Those are basically you're having physical symptoms, but there's no organic cause to explain what are the physical symptoms. So we call them somatoform disorder. Or in Bangladesh, they call it basically functional. We used to call, when I was doing internship in Bangladesh, then we used to call it, hey, this is functional. This is no reason. But now we know it is a mental health problem. So I think I've covered most of it. And then, okay, separate one is a substance use disorders. Let's say heroin addiction. Is that a mental illness? What do you guys think? Can I open it up a little bit just for a couple of minutes? Do you think substance use disorder by itself is a mental illness and we should treat it?
I think every kind of abuse leads from, like, initiates from something that happens in your brain. I feel like that. That's my personal opinion. Like, if you are happy with your life and if you have everything you need, I don't think people kind of move towards the substance abuse part unless it's just for fun or recreation. I think it does initiate or start from something that is happening in your brain somewhere. I feel like that. I don't know.
That's okay. Let's take about alcohol. Let's say alcohol. Okay. There are a lot of people who do not have any problem, but they drink for fun and then drink too much and then becoming alcoholic. Do you think we should treat that? Do you think you should treat anybody here? Is that an illness? They're drinking. Okay. Why should we treat that?
Well, isn't alcoholism being treated right now?
It is. I mean, all substance use disorders are separate entities, like mental health entities. Okay, we are supposed to treat them, but I know the controversy is, okay, is that should we treat them or should we not treat them as an illness? This is under your control. Okay, why don't you treat them? So bottom line is, the answer to that is yes, we should treat them. And why? Because we have smokers, we know heart disease, right? And we treat smokers, right? Uh, let's not talk about smokers. Let's talk about food. We eat a lot of fat food. We eat a lot of sugary food. But we know that if we were vegetarian and we had a salad every day, we could control all the diabetes. We probably could substantially lower our cholesterol problems. But we do treat the cholesterol problems, even though it is because of your bad choices of food, right? So that's why the substance use disorders are like that.
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting way to think about it. But that's actually a very good point, and I'd never think it quite like that in terms of, how a food disorder leads to, physical issues, and we rush into, treating that as a physical issue. But alcoholism and a substance abuse can also lead to things like that, and we often like, hey, why don't you just stop, especially if they have a good life.
Yeah. Okay, I'll let probably Nipa speak from here on.
Yes, we will give the floor to Nipa Pu now. So let's welcome her.
Thank you. Thank you, Anjan Bhai, for all the details that we usually, actually, I didn't know many of these, so thank you. And so my part is to work with functional adults, and it's good to great. Like, we are already high performing, we are already high achieving people, especially the Seattle crowds. There is no doubt about it.
Can I interrupt you?
Sure.
How do you define we are high performing?
Take it lightly for now. I will question, we will answer, but kind of like just to, it's not like 100% accurate. I'm saying that is the group we hang out with are mostly those that people came from different countries, especially those, I'm from Bangladesh and many of you are. So, and Seattle tech industry, like everyone that come for coaching are like already high performing. So that's my population. And I have some slides I'll show. And just to add one thing on what Anjan Bhai was talking about, many things are kind of like a very critical mental illness. But I want to say here in this public forum that there was a couple of years ago, I was going through a bout of like really nothing was exciting for me. And I started noticing that is, maybe I should go to the doctor. Maybe I should ask, is this a depression thing? Because I never experienced, nobody in my family I know that had that. And when I went to the doctor, actually my coach, I shared that with my coach too. And she said, yeah, let's go there and ask. And the doctor asked me a few questions and she said, yes, that I passed being depressed. So she gave me some medication and it helped. So I wanted to kind of say it here that it's okay to go there, because by doing my work helped with the medication. Then I didn't need to do all the work by myself. The medication was supporting me. So that's my part on that question. So let me share the slides I have. Okay, one sec. Slideshow. Can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So as I said, we are talking about functional people, how they strengthen their resilience. And especially, we had some challenges last 1 year or more. So recently, this article on New York Times came up by Adam Grant. So he was saying that is, even though many of us are not clinically ill, not in the mental illness, but a majority of us are languishing, 55%. And yes, languishing is a new term even for me. So he defined this languishing as when you're not feeling the zest for life. You're not feeling lots of hope. You're feeling kind of meh, the word he used, meh. And ideally, we want to be on the right side of the spectrum, the thriving, flourishing, resilience. That's where when we are there, we enjoy life more and we make significant contribution to our family and to the society and to our workplace. So the good news is that it's not about luck. We all can cultivate our mental resilience. It's like physical muscles. Think about if you are not sick, that doesn't readily translate that you are very healthy. So from that illness to really healthy, there is a gap. There is something you need to do deliberately to make yourself healthy. You eat right, you go to the gym and do other healthy practice every day, every week, month after month, right? Similarly, same thing for our resilience when we want to cultivate it in ourselves. So today's, I'm going to focus on this cultivation of resilience, some misconceptions. And since all of us are busy people, so maybe what are some micro habits we can build in ourselves to increase our resilient muscles? So what is this really? Think about a car. We are that car. We are driving in this rugged terrain. And the tire pressure is low. What happens if you keep on driving in that situation? Your engine performance degrades. Eventually, it breaks down, right? We don't do that with our cars. I don't think anyone would say, yeah, I do that with my car, but we do that with ourselves. We are conditioned to think that is, since I am okay, since I have been strong, I should keep on going when my tire pressure is low. So, and the misconception is endurance, like powering through is resilience. Incorrect. So American Psychology Association defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, and significant sources of stress. We didn't have any shortage of it in the past 1 year. And even before the pandemic, life was not that smooth for most of us. So the good news is that when we adapt well, the process of adapting well, pay attention. When we do that and overcome that situation, we become stronger. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Remember the song? So talking about the myth, another one we think that is, I don't need it. And it takes so much time to do those things that builds resilience. For example, self-care. When people talk about self-care, it goes to, okay, spa day, or a beach vacation 1 week. Well, all those are nice. I'd go there any day, but how many times can you go there, right? And of course, there is money involved. But the good news is it doesn't have to be always those things. You can do some exercise, resilience building exercise in 1 minute, in 60 seconds, 90 seconds. So if you're up for it, I want to challenge you to do some exercise with me right here, right now. All I want is 1 minute from you. It won't take too much. So hopefully those who are listening are not driving, because the exercise needs you to close your eyes. So sit or stand comfortably wherever you are. Maybe close your eyes and take one slow breath. Now think about a person who made you who you are today. It could be your parents, your mother, your father, your sibling, a friend, a teacher. And now think about one interaction with them, as you had like hundreds of them growing up. Just pick one. Maybe you are in kindergarten. Maybe you are in the middle school. One interaction, think about it. Maybe they helped you with math one night. You were struggling and they were there. Maybe one night you were depressed and they were there with you. Hopefully you have one of those memories loaded right now. Now pay attention as you are thinking about that occasion. What are you feeling? Feel free to write that feeling word on the chat. Just one word. Some people say, I'm feeling loved. I'm feeling nostalgic. I'm feeling somebody's there for me. Is there any words coming on the chat? Yeah, I see something. Lisa, can you read any of those?
Yeah, thankful.
Yeah. With this exercise, you just activated your parasympathetic nervous system.
So we've got a few more. One is supported, disciplined, relief, feeling someone valuable.
Yeah, yeah.
Very much.
Thank you. This parasympathetic nervous system is an antidote for stress. You have it inside you, and we sometimes call it gratitude. I just showed you with the example, with the exercise you did, that if you could do that maybe once a day, imagine how life would become for better. So Microsoft did this research recently. I think it came out this week. When you have back-to-back meetings with no breaks, just you, since you're working remotely these days, go from one meeting to another, your stress builds up. The first 4 is that when someone didn't take a break and went from first meeting to the 4th meeting during that day. The red, yellow is the higher stress. And the picture on the bottom are the ones when the participants took break in between meetings. And it is not a long break, maybe 5 minutes break. And the blue says less stress. So they already found data that those micro breaks can help you alleviate stress. So,
Can I ask a question?
sure, go ahead.
Why is it most blue in the fourth meeting?
We can talk about all the nitty-gritty, but I think that would be a question for Tamara, who is in Microsoft Research. If you do not know her, I'm happy to introduce, but I just read this article that came up on Microsoft's blog.
This is sorry to interrupt. This is an EEG results, or what is it?
Yeah, this says EEG cap to monitor electrical activity in the brain. This small picture here. So basically, the point being is that we talk about, oh, my life is so busy. I do not have a breather. Even research showed that 5 minutes breather can do wonders. You have that in you. And with this exercise, I showed you 1 minute of that breathing. If you do not think about that parasympathetic exercise, just do the breathing. 3 mindful breaths. My clients are like that. They are going from one meeting to another. And the first exercise they get is that make sure you take 3 breaths in between meetings. So funny thing, I had this one client, she came back after 2 weeks and she said, yeah, Charmaine, I did those breathing that you said. So I said, so how did you notice anything? How was the difference? She said, nah, not much. So I was curious, like, so what did you do actually? So she said, in between meetings, I checked my emails and I did the breathing at that time, multitasking. I'm like, missed the whole point. You need to be away from your computer and that you have to focus on your breathing. And there are some people says, I didn't have the time to take the breath. I'm like, really? The last whole week you didn't breathe? You're still alive. Don't lie, please. So anyhow, I'm sure like these ideas are sparkling more ideas in you. Think about, challenge yourself. What can I do in 5 minutes? What can I do in 90 seconds? And then pick one. For now, just think about like one idea and share that on the chat. You know, we are running out of time very soon. So please say, commit to yourself. It doesn't have to be here, but even for yourself, say something, write something.
We've got breathing, we've got meditate, a couple of those.
Yeah. And there are lots of research on that. If you take that mindful breaths, if you could do some, this is meditation, of course, it changes your brain and it doesn't require a lot of time. And the funny thing is, funny means significant thing is, it doesn't have to be always breath. Whatever you do, maybe you're doing your dishes. If you are focusing on the water that touches your hand, that's meditation. When you're hugging your kid, if you are just focusing on the hug, so I was listening to this and says 20 seconds. If you're hugging your loved one, just focusing on the hug, that is meditation. That actually reduces your stress. So I'm sure your brain is active now with all the ideas. So pick one, something small, and commit to it for 1 week and see what happens. And one thing I didn't say what not to do is do not check the news every hour. Do not go to the social media every second. That actually is the counter thing. So last 1 year, I've been thinking about it. There's lots of advice everywhere, like 10 things to improve your mental muscles, blah, blah, blah. The thing is, you don't remember 10 things because we are already busy. Our head is almost exploding. So I came up with this simple model, 3C model: care, connect, and create. So we talked about care a bit. Notice when you should take a breather and improve that noticing skill. We do not notice. We'd rather die than notice. So I would challenge you to notice your need to take a breath and be selfish about it and recharge. Then next thing is connect. Connect with what is important to you. Positivity, people, spirituality, the belief system that we believe in something bigger than us is actually a big factor for people who are good in emotionally, more grounded. During this pandemic, my family started a conference called Every Week Friday Night. Before, we used to do it randomly, but we made a routine for us to have that time dedicated for this conference call. We use Messenger, Facebook Messenger. That small thing actually improved my happiness, my well-being. It didn't take a lot of effort, but it was a mindful decision that we made. And the third thing is the create. Think about during this pandemic, there are a lot of things we are asked not to do, right? Then we got to create. What else? How else can we take care of ourselves? I used to go to the gym for my Zumba class. So these days I go for walks every day. I use YouTube for Zumba instructions. My friend Tania actually told me about this YouTube videos that some people offers generously. So I got to do those things while I'm at home. And giving, helping others, even calling someone, checking on them is an act of giving. And donate for a cause. Plug for Spreeha. So do that. It will improve your mental resilience. And, not all size fits everyone. So experiment, try something new, refine, see what you like, what you want to change. Customization is the key. Anisa?
Yeah, can I ask you a question? I think we have a question on our chat box, and I don't know, maybe this is a question to both of you. So I'm gonna, someone, would you like to read that?
Sure. So the question says, what would be 2 to 3 ways to keep yourself sane during pandemic when there is so much loss and stress around? I think it's a very true question, and very relatable for us during this time. So
yeah. Can I share a story?
Sure. Please.
So this was a client who was working with me for 3-4 months. And it was towards the end of our coaching engagement. And she was telling me all the great things that he accomplished at work and the recognition she was getting. And all the words were right words, but looking at his face on Zoom, I was like, where is the enthusiasm? You have been working for this for months, but your face is not saying that you are excited about it. What's going on? She paused, and then she smiled, saying, this is not, it's kind of like not that exciting that I thought I would be. This working from home is taking a toll on me. I do not have a me time anymore. And this is draining. So I challenged her, like, so what can you do? What is one thing can you try? Because you do not have a me time during your commute that you used to have. You used to have time at your work that only you had. Now, in this new situation, let's come up with a new idea. So she said, maybe after 5, I can go for a run by a trail all by myself. That would be fun. So she did that for a week. And then we met again. And she was all beaming that day. She said, oh my goodness, this one thing improved my emotional condition so much. I'm more present for my family. I'm more productive at work. And she was telling me all the things that she did that week.
Can I add to that? I think Nipa's answer is pretty good. One thing what helps me personally is this: if you can focus on what you have instead of focusing on what you don't have or what you could have had. That's one thing. And the other thing is, I would highly suggest to take one thing at a time and one day at a time. Do not basically stay in present time. Stay today. Don't future trip. What if that? What somebody catches COVID in my family? I think that will be one way to handle it. Is take one day at a time, one thing at a time, and stay focused on what you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anjum Bhai, for your answer. Thank you, Nipapu.
Can I add to what Nipa had just mentioned?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. I think what Nipa was saying is very important. Mindful meditation is very helpful in my own life. I have seen that. Now, somebody may ask, okay, what is the difference between mindfulness and meditation? Basically, mindfulness is something you're focusing on one thing. And meditation is basically you're not focusing on anything. You're focusing on your breathing. The way I handle certain things is like, what is our natural instinct? If there's an unpleasant thought or I did something wrong, or immediately we go into basically suppressing that. We want to avoid that feeling. We don't want to. What will be a simple one? Okay, a vague one will be like Seahawks lost. Okay, I'm so depressed now. Don't avoid it. Okay, don't say confront it. Okay, Seahawks lost. That's good. Okay, Seahawks lost, and I'm feeling bad. It's just a symptom. It's just a feeling, and I can control it. I don't have to feel bad about it. It's not the end of the world. There's another season we can look forward to. So that will be what I'm saying is that be mindful of that feeling, and then but don't react to it. And that has been very helpful in my own personal life. And I have advised a lot of my patients, and I think they have benefited in general from these kind of practices.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. Thank you to both our speakers today. This was very valuable and, of course, enlightening. A lot of information we did not have before, now we do. And I think it will help us moving forward, and definitely a big round of applause for both of our speakers. And just keeping that in mind, like just whatever we talked about today, like it feels like stress, anxiety, grief during this pandemic is very natural. It's a natural feeling during this time, and also like in other times as well. So we learned how to like cope with this stress during this time, and there are ways to cope with it. That's the biggest thing I think that we got out of this conversation, that like, you know, do not watch too much news, take lots of breaks, make time to unwind, connect with your family and friends, and of course, take care of your body and mind, and be more mindful of how you're using your 24 hours of the day. So keeping that in mind, I would like to go to Onezapu for this last part of our event. Please, Onezapu.
Thank you, Moon Moon.
Thank you.
And I know it's about time that we end this conversation, but I'm going to be really brief. And I really want to thank our speakers and Moon Moon, you and Adiba and Raju for all the logistics behind. And thanks to Fatpa and Undaniapu for being the brain behind this knowledge sharing as well. And so those of you who don't know me, I'm Firdaus Oneza, and I have been bugging all of you for Spreeha. So you'll be hearing from me again and again, but I would like to mention one thing. What Nipa mentioned, I really like that, like donating really makes me feel great. So, so donate to Spreeha. And this is the month of Ramadan. So some people I know many of you are practicing zakat. So we are open for those donations as well. And this is the community knowledge share. This is our second knowledge share event in this year. So our intent is to empower each other as part of our mission, to empower people and transform lives. So this is what we have started to do online, sharing knowledge. We have a big pool of resources within the community, and we want to share each other's knowledge so that we can empower each other. So that's the goal. And again, thank you, all of you, for your time.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Nipa.
Thank you, Nipa. Thank you, Anjan.
Nipa. Yeah.
Sure,
Thank you, Moon Moon and
Thank you,
Doneza.
Moon Moon.
Thank you, everybody, for being a part of this event.